Our very own Cheryl Preheim is standing by right now. Now, Cheryl, I know that you spoke with Senator Raphael Reverend Warnock, but you also spoke with another one of Georgia's senators as well.
Yeah, and it's clear the impact that President Carter made on both the senators, representing Georgia as the one president from the state of Georgia and someone that they feel really set a tone for what politics should be like. Here's a little bit of our conversation with Senator John Ossoff. What are your thoughts as Washington, D.C. receives the former president for a final time?
It'll be a solemn moment in the Capitol Rotunda today. The Senate will process out of the Senate chamber. We'll all take a moment to pay our final respects to President Carter and to reflect on his legacy. And I think it's, in particular, those of us who represent Georgia, a significant moment as the whole nation reflects on the legacy of one of the most historically significant Georgians ever to engage in public life in the United States.
It was so telling back home to see 23,000 people come through the Carter Center to say a final goodbye, a thank you, and we expect a lot of people to do the same here in Washington, D.C. What, as you look back on an incredible life of service, what stands out to you most when you think of President Carter?
One of the most remarkable things about President Carter is how he had such an impact, not just as an elected official, a governor and a president of the United States, but in his post-presidency. He and his organization and his First Lady's work advancing democracy and free and fair elections around the world. They're very impactful, sometimes unheralded, but very impactful work in public health and disease eradication, really demonstrating his continued commitment to having an impact and ability to have an impact even after he'd left elected office.
Such a conscious decision, and I know the thought from the Carter Center, much of the family, was the best way that each of us could honor his legacy is to choose a way to put good into the world as well.
Well, I think it'll also be an important moment as the country is seemingly so politically divided for folks of all ideological persuasions and political affiliations to take a moment and reflect on the life and contributions of a great American.
Interesting. It's such an important point you make, because as people are talking about President Carter and his long life, most people are talking about kindness, character, authenticity, sincerity, not as much about politics, really the things that bring us together, not divide us.
Yeah, in his time, of course, he was also embroiled in the daily cut and thrust of partisan politics, as we all now today. And yet, when we look back on his presidency and his life, we put that to the side. We focus on his contributions to the nation and to the world. And I hope it can be a unifying moment for us here in Congress today.
As we transition here in Washington in this period of time, what do you hope of President Carter's legacy is carried on as the work continues in Washington?
Well, I think that President Carter brought a moral grounding to his public service. And so much of politics has become debased from core American values, even from just the fundamentals of civility and mutual respect. I hope that part of his legacy can inspire us all to treat each other decently and kindly, even if we have sharp and profound disagreements.
Interesting sentiment about bringing people together at this time in the nation's capital. Think about this. Yesterday, of course, was the certification of the electoral votes and the beginning of the transfer of power on 4 years to the day of the deadly U.S. Capitol riot. Of course, getting ready in here in the nation's capital for the inauguration. A lot of security around that. And then at the same time, the beginning of President Carter's funeral event starting today as he's making his way to D.C. and then will ultimately lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda before the National Cathedral ceremony and funeral services on Thursday. All of this happening at one time here in Washington, D.C. You know, there's a condolence book here that people have been signing since his passing, lines and lines of people wanting to leave a personal note. I think that's very telling. And one note that we read said that I'll teach my children and grandchildren about how someone can have power and still have humility, put self down to help others. I thought that really stood out. Made me think of a story about inauguration in 1977. President Carter said that he went up to his mom right before he was going to put his hand on the Bible and go through that ceremony. He said, "Mom, you must be very proud of your son today." And she winked at him and said, "Your brother's done really well." He said that humility was just part of the family. And we are thinking of the Carter family, a big, very close family, all on their way to Washington, D.C. as we speak. They will follow the horse-drawn caisson with that flag-draped casket down Pennsylvania Avenue for a final journey to the U.S. Capitol in a matter of hours, and we will bring you that coverage throughout the day.